I love this. I love what this Sunday is about. I love what Mr. J does because for me, I was in a little bit of a different situation. I was 13 years old and I was standing in the middle of an auditorium at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, and I was at a summer youth camp, something that was really immersive and it was a big deal, similar to what Mr. J does, but this was geared towards high schoolers. And I stood there in this room of like 1,100 other high schoolers, and a pastor was up on stage, a guy who I now get to call a friend, Mark Moore, and he's handed everybody this scarlet cord. And as he gave that out, he talked to us all about the story of Rahab and what she did a few thousand years ago for a couple of Jewish spies, and how her actions were so big and so monumentous that not only did she end up saving her whole family, but she would go on and be listed in the genealogy of Jesus. And it was in that moment, holding that little scarlet cord, that I thought, oh, if God can use a prostitute, then maybe he can use me. And if God can love her, then just perhaps he actually loves me. And it was in that moment to where like the lights came on and I was like, I'm going to give my entire life over to Jesus. I'm going to give everything. And it was in that moment where I also felt this call to vocational ministry, to where in that point I was like, I want everything that I do. I want my entire life focus. I want my job and my whole identity to be about this. And what's super cool is even this past summer, we went to a very similar conference, and we had two of our students here at Westminster feel that same call to vocational ministry. And there's something unique about that, because I look back on 13-year-old Adam, and in that moment I knew I wanted to go into vocational full-time ministry. But man, I had no idea how it would play out. And thinking about it even now, I look back on my life and I had this kind of end goal in mind, but the process in between, I never would have guessed I'd end up in Bellevue, Washington, after spending time in southern Arizona by going to a absurdly tiny Bible college in Omaha, Nebraska. You see, I had no idea how the steps in my life were going to be playing out. And all of us, we've got some level of confusion, some level of like a fog in our lives. For some of us in the room, you're pretty similar to how I am. You know that there's an end goal, but the steps in between, you have no idea how you get there or what that process looks like. Perhaps for you, you think about owning a business. And you think, man, I would love to own a business. I want to be my own boss, but I don't know if I should go back to school and get like a business degree, whatever that means. I don't know if I need to sell everything I have and put it up for collateral and start this thing. And the thing, I don't even know what it might be. Some of us, we think of the end goal of having a family. But you look around and you're like, man, I have not dated a single person that seems like somebody I would actually want to be with. Everybody that I date feels so toxic and they're bringing something out in me. And I have this goal. I want to have a family, but I don't know how to get there. For some of us, the fog is a little bit thicker, to where even the end goal doesn't seem very clear. Maybe for you, it's a career. These people around you, they talk about like what they want to do with their life and their job, and you just kind of feel like the one person in the room that you're like, man, I had an opportunity, and I think I like this one, but I might jump from another job to another job, and what I actually want to be when I grow up, I still don't know. Or maybe you think about the end of your life and it feels like there's a fog there and you don't know even what kind of family you want around you at the end of your life. Do you really want to have kids? Do you really want to be married? Or is that just like an expectation that's been put on you? And even if you don't recognize yourself in any of those situations, there's one area in all of our lives where I think we all have this fog that I wish, and I'm sure you do too, wish that it was just cleared away. And it's this question of what is God's call on my life? Because maybe you don't even believe in Jesus. Maybe you came here because somebody said, oh yeah, our church is doing this really fun kids thing, and I'll buy you brunch afterwards if you come with me. And even if that's you today, and you may not even believe that there's a God out there, wouldn't it be great if somebody could step down from heaven and tell you how to live your life? And for all of us that are Christians, we've been doing this Jesus thing for a while, and you get into the habit of it, and part of it feels almost redundant. You're like, so I just now go to church and go to small group and wash, rinse, and repeat until I die? Or maybe a pastor gets up on stage and talks about this idea of God's calling on your life, and you're like, I'm called to go to church. And this idea of how do we figure out what God is calling us to can sometimes be really, really difficult. And we've been in this series, we started it last week called One Life, where we want to start to drill into this idea of you and I, we only have one life. So how do we make this one thing count? How do we make this really matter? And one of the ideas that we want to draw on is God has a calling on your life. And how do we find what that is? Now, we've been looking at the story of the biblical person Nehemiah. And I think that even his story is going to help shed some light on how you and I can find God's calling in our lives. How we can start to maybe clear out a little bit of that fog. So if you've got a Bible, there we go, wow, yeah. I'm going to have to prepare for that the rest of the time. All right, so if you've got a Bible, you can turn to the book of Nehemiah. We've been in this series, we're only in it for 4 weeks, and we're going to hit the entire book of Nehemiah, which is a lot. And today, we're going to be looking at Nehemiah chapters 3 through 6. And don't worry, we're not reading all of chapters 3 through 6 in this one sitting. But turn to chapter 3 in Nehemiah, and as you're getting there, I want to give a little bit of context for where we're at and talk a little bit about what Ryan capped on last week. So, a few hundred years before Jesus, the city of Jerusalem has been overtaken, burned down, and left in ruins. And this is a big deal because this is the holy city of God. This is where the temple was. This is where God's presence was on earth, and it's been absolutely demolished. And a big part of that, really important to Nehemiah's story, is that the walls of the city have been burned down and knocked over. Imagine living in a really scary neighborhood and somebody took all your locks. That's essentially what's happened. The city is unprotected and not safe, and Nehemiah has been living in another country, serving the king of Persia, and he gets the story of, hey, Jerusalem is in a bad way. So Nehemiah prays quite a bit, and he feels this calling from God to go back to Jerusalem and start rebuilding the wall. And that's what Ryan talked about quite a bit last week. And this week, we're going to get into what I think is like the really exciting part of Nehemiah. It's where the wall actually starts getting built. And so I won't bore you with all of Nehemiah chapter 3 because he starts rebuilding the wall, and it's the scriptural equivalent of plaques on park benches. He's like, these folks built this part. These folks built this part. And it goes on for a long time. If you're really into geography, ancient Jewish geography, it's really, really fascinating. For the rest of us, it feels like plaques on park benches. But there is one section of it that I really want us to hyper-focus on because it's unique, even in this area. It's Nehemiah chapter 3, and we're going to start in verse 28. Nehemiah writes this: above the horse gate, the priests repaired, each one opposite his own house. After them, Zadok the son of Amir repaired opposite his own house. After him, Shammai the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, repaired. After him, Hananiah the son of Shelemiah and Hanun the sixth son of Zalaph repaired another section. After him, Meshullam the son of Berechiah repaired opposite his chamber. After him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired as far as the house of the temple servants and of the merchants opposite the mustard gate, and to the upper chamber of the corner. And between the upper chamber of the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and the merchants repaired. Thrilling. But why this is important is because it differentiates what Nehemiah had been doing this entire section beforehand. Because before this and after this moment, Nehemiah is just saying groups of people that helped with certain parts of the wall. So he essentially says a tribe, a group, or a family. Now, what's important about that is that some people can thus be not included. You know, if we go around this week and we say, Westminster did VBS and we did X, Y, and Z, that includes all of us. But it might not include you. Some people, if we go around and we say, oh yeah, well, all of the churches on the east side did this, this, and this for Jubilee Service Day. That does include all of us, but it might not include specific people. And in this section, Nehemiah changes it up because he starts naming names. He changes it up with this one specific group, and he says, no, wait, it wasn't just the priests that did this. This guy, he fixed the wall in front of his house. This guy, he fixed the wall in front of his house. And he goes through and starts name-dropping people, saying what they had done. And I think that that's important. And I think it's really crucial to notice, because I think that we're called to do the same. Notice that Nehemiah doesn't start saying like, oh yeah, these people fixed these major sections. But he says they fixed the area in front of their house. This small bit of the wall, this one guy fixed it. And he did it. It wasn't this big deal. It wasn't this important, massive, superstar thing. It was a small thing. And it's important. And he did it. And you see, you and I, all of us in kind of Western society, we almost have like this problem with small things. Because we love big things. We love superstars or people who do outrageously massive, incredible things. And then the little things we're like, oh yeah, but let's not get to that. Let's focus on the big thing. You see, I have this kind of mixed relationship with Instagram. I try to be on it as little as humanly possible while still like being on it because I'm a youth pastor. But there's one corner of Instagram that I absolutely adore, that I love so much. It's this one guy who calls his channel Preachers and Sneakers. And some of y'all have already heard of it, like the laughs. You know exactly where I'm headed with this. What this guy does is he takes photos of these incredible celebrity pastors as they're up on stage doing their thing. And then all he does is he posts the price tag of some shoe that they're wearing or a jacket they're wearing. And y'all, it is contentious. Like, people fight over this like crazy. And some people get really, really upset. How could a pastor ever spend that kind of money on a shoe? Other people get really upset on the other side, and they say, this is a church problem, and this is kind of where I lean a little bit more. This is something for us to self-reflect on, that we love superstars. We see this person get up on stage and we're like, wow, that guy, that woman can absolutely do amazing, big things. Let's start just throwing fistfuls of money in their direction. Let's fund them. Let's make their stage even bigger. Let's let them do even bigger things yet. And we do this oftentimes to the neglect of the small things. The small things that you and I can do. And we think, well, yeah, but I can't do the big thing, and I don't want to do the small thing because, well, that doesn't get me likes on Instagram. And then we end up doing nothing. And the things that I think are important from this is that, one, doing the big thing isn't the important thing. And two, doing this together is really important. Jesus even talks about this a little bit in one parable that he gives. It's in Matthew chapter 25. And so if you've got your Bible, wow, you guys are so good at this. Turn to Matthew chapter 25. This is in Matthew 25, verse 14. It's often called the parable of the talents. But Jesus is giving this parable. He's telling this to his followers, to people who are just listening to him and thinking that Jesus seems swell. He says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away." And we're just going to pause there for a second. This is a little bit of cultural understanding because Jesus is talking to a bunch of Jewish people 2,000 years ago. He's not talking to Americans in the 21st century. So this word talent is a word that we can often get confused or just be like, oh, it's not a thing that they can do. That's where I always got confused. It's actually a measurement of weight. It's not even a measurement of money. And so the exact amount of money that's listed in here is kind of up for grabs because it's most likely a measurement of a talent of silver. It could be a talent of a different material. Either way, Jesus is painting this parable in the fact that the master is giving away absolutely silly amounts of money. This would be similar to us saying, yeah, this guy left town and he gave one of his hired hands like $10 million. And the next guy, he gave him like $3 million and $1 million. Like, this is not actually happening. But it's setting the stage to already be pretty dramatic. And so Jesus continues on. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, "Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I've made 5 talents more." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, "Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I've made 2 talents more." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, "Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours." But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will be more given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And we read this, and there is something that kind of boils up that's like, whoa, that's harsh, dude. Like, that guy gave you what you gave him. That is 0% gain, 0% loss, which isn't bad. And clearly in this parable, Jesus is trying to say that there is an expectation of a return on investment, and that expectation differs from person to person. That expectation for one guy is, oh yeah, he's going to bring me at least 5 more talents. And this guy, he's going to bring me not nearly that many, like 2. And this guy, well, fingers crossed, I hope he brings 1. And that's not to say one is better or worse than the other. And maybe this is important just for me. Maybe I'm the only one in here. We were at the Christ in Youth Camp. And man, I got to admit, maybe you're in here like me and you feel like you've been given 2 talents and you're looking at the guy with 5. Like, I wish I was given that. And then you kind of freeze and you stop doing anything with your 2 talents. Maybe this is a good moment for you to really look into your life and being like, have I just been holding on to one single thing, scared of what to do with it, and so I haven't done anything? And maybe I haven't even been fixing that small section of the wall in front of me. Maybe I haven't been serving in the church. Maybe I haven't been doing anything because I'm scared that I might screw it up. And these 2 things come together in that you and I, the odds of us going out and being a superstar, doing something absolutely world-changing, that our names are written down in history forever, it's unlikely. But the odds of you having something in front of you is quite high. There's this one pastor and author who says this. He says that the calling that God has on your life is where your greatest passion and the world's deepest hurt intersect. And I love that. But I think in the information age, I think it might change even a little bit. I think we might even be able to simplify that because we see a lot of the world's deepest hurts. I think God's calling is where your ability and any of the world's pain intersect. If you have an ability, you have even a single talent, and you see something in the world in front of you that needs fixing, that's probably God. That's probably his calling. And this is why we put this whole VBS set up in front of you. Because the call of God on our lives is simply to fix the wall in front of you. And when we do this all together, something incredible can happen. Nehemiah talks about it in this way. It's in Nehemiah chapter 6. In Nehemiah 6:15, he says this: "So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days." Everybody fixed a small piece, and it got done way faster than one person could have fixed the whole thing. Verse 16 says, "And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God." When you and I come together and we each do a small piece, we can end up doing something incredible, and not of our own ability, but as Nehemiah said, the people even outside of Jerusalem recognized that it wasn't just the Jews who had done this, it was God helping them. And yes, shamelessly, VBS this week needs your help. If that's praying all week, if that's changing your schedule and being here, doing some small thing. Maybe you're standing in the gym and you're telling kids what the rules are for dodgeball. Maybe you're sitting around and making sure that kids don't pluck each other's eyes out. That's important. Maybe you're helping build crafts. Maybe you're sitting with a kid and walking them through, oh yeah, John is right here in the Bible. When we do something small together, something incredible can happen, and it's because of God. And we even remember how much we need him in our lives, how much we need him to work through us every single week, because we take communion. And this is a moment for us to remember that there's no way we could have earned our way to God. There's no way that we could have made God like us or love us or forgive us, but it's all because of what he did for us. Because on the night that Jesus was going to get betrayed, he had his closest friends around him at the table, and he broke some bread, and he said, "This is my body given for you." Then he poured some wine into the glasses of his friends, and he said, "This is my blood. It's being shed for you. And whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup," Paul later would go on to say, "you proclaim Jesus' death until he comes." We collectively proclaim that we have to have God help us. So as we're about to take communion, there's going to be some people in the back middle. There will be a few people up front, and we'll say a quick blessing over you as you take this. This is for those of us in the room that believe in Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, it's just juice and a wafer. But for those of us who do, this is a special, important moment. And if you can't come up to us, just raise your hand. We'll come to you. But before we do that, would you guys pray with me? Lord, thank you. Thank you for calling us to be your kingdom workers. Thank you for calling us to be your servants. And Lord, as much as we would love to have this whole path of our lives laid out in front of us, just crystal clear, God, I pray that we would have the courage to follow you in the next step. That we would follow you in fixing the wall that's in front of us. God, help us to work together and be your servants collectively. And God, help us. We need you desperately. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.